Hello, we're back and we are continuing to paint. And while I was away, guess what? I was unhappy with how my modeling was going, so I went back, even though we've covered everything you need to know about modeling. And if you are missing something in modeling that you maybe are a bit confused at this point from how to sculpt in Mudbox, just send me an email or a comment on the channel and I'll try and answer them. So sculpting, yeah, I just came back and I've got something that looks a bit better than what I had before, back to where we wanted to be with our painting. And I wanted to show you a couple of things first. I have this, I'll just turn my layers off, this initial deep red layer I made, and with these additional layers on top I can start doing a couple things. I can start adjusting how these layers will work on top of each other. So up here in the upper right in my paint layers, I have, much like Photoshop and After Effects, I can have different layer modes on top of layers. So layer modes, if you're not familiar, they're just different algorithms to display how one layer will work on top of another. So right now I can just try and multiply and get different results. Screen. And how I like to work is I just kind of try a few things on each layer. So I just move to layer 3, try and overlay, hard light, multiply, darken, soft light, and they're all, working at various levels. We're still getting some nice texture happening. But what this underlying red layer, if I wanted to, I can right click on this layer and I can adjust the color here down at the bottom, and I get this nice little adjust color window, and I can just slide my hue back and forth to kind of get a color that I like. Maybe take the value up a bit and that saturation down, and you can see how we can start working in these different layers to get a much richer surface. Now I've got this, I painted this kind of scaly skin texture before, and it's even though it was tiled, we're getting borders on it, the texture, so I'm just going to delete that. What I'm going to do, instead of painting my diffuse, I'm going to try a new channel. I'm going to click on create new paint layer, and instead of a diffuse channel, I'm going to paint a bump map. Hit OK. And this will allow me to actually paint bump according to a texture, and I'm going to use one of the stencil images as, for my texture. If I mouse over, I've got this kind of VW skin or black and white skin image, and before I kind of get too far, I'm going to click on my paintbrush tool so I can see its attributes, and I'm going to turn its strength down to, I'm going to try 1 and just see how that works. And I'm just going to paint, and I might not see anything happening until I get up close, and I can see I get a little bit of texture happening. I'm going to hit Q to hide that, so we can see how I've got some actual texture happening. Now this isn't a true displacement map, but we can convert that later to be a displacement map. I'm going to select my paint layer, and I'm just going to undo that for now. You can see I've got this other layer here. I'm going to go back, click on that skin. This brings up my stencil, and what I can do is I can invert the values and I'll get a better chance. I'm going to hold my S key and just scale that up a bit. And now I'm just going to try painting. Hit Q to hide. And now I can see I'm getting some nice skin texture. Now this might still be a little extreme, but I'm just going to go ahead and paint And what I should do, as well is turn mirror on. So let me just backtrack a bit here. Turn mirror X on, turn my stencil on. Now I should be able to generate some bump. Oops, I shouldn't have zoomed out, because that's going to determine the size of my image there. My map. And I'm just doing my whole head here. Okay, Q to hide that. And now I can see I've got a very bumpy textured skin surface. And I can control this, which is really nice painting layers here, is to I missed kind of the face here. Let me just take one step back before I get too far. You should also think about your edge flow, and you should kind of think about painting in that edge flow as well, but this is going to work fine. So areas in our face, you're going to have to kind of study your own face, but there'll be areas that'll be less in kind of porous as this, but it's looking alright. Like the ears won't be this bad. I can control it a couple of ways. That kind of depth here, I started controlling the depth by taking my power of my brush to begin with, the strength down to 1. But another method here in this layer, as bump map layers, I have this strength here, which is really just means transparency, and I can just take the transparency down. If I take that down to, say, 50, it's a lot less noticeable. So now you can see we're getting that cracking is happening a lot less. Another thing I can do is I have this paint erase tool. I can erase some of this, but instead of using a strength of 100, if I just use something like 20, that's like an opacity, and I can just paint out areas that aren't going to be as bumped. I want to make sure that the lips will have their own way of being treated. I don't need a wrinkly neck yet. Some pores here and there is good, and I'm just kind of clicking to get that. Back to my paint layer, Q to maybe add a bit more texture on top. And if I didn't want it to look like this, I'll just Control Z to undo some of that. I can add a second paint layer, a second paint layer for bump. So new bump map, hit OK. I'm at 100%. I hit Q because I'm still on that last brush, and I can paint on top here to get a variation of texture. And of course I can just take that down a bit. Without affecting this other paint layer 4 in my bump map. I use my erase tool again to just take that, knock that down just a bit. And that's stencil painting in a nutshell. So I've got my bump map layers and my diffuse layers, and in the next tutorial I'll just talk about starting to paint more detail and more layers, and more or less will just kind of be a nice speed detail for painting. Thank you.